Rockford's home for classic rocks, 96.7 The Eagle. Good morning, I'm Double T. Special guest joining me, Don Wildman, host of Buried Worlds, that's going to premiere tonight at 8 o'clock on the Travel Channel. Don, how you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So Buried Worlds, kind of spooky sounding. What is it all about?
Exactly. So I went on what was basically a global paranormal mystery tour. I mean, it was an odyssey. It started in September of the fall, this fall past, and went until January. We shot this show all over the world. This was back in the days when you could do that sort of thing. And what we were doing was looking at the history of these places through the lens of the paranormal, and ultimately having experiences with people who were on the ground doing rituals, doing ghost hunts and so forth, trying to sort of dig into the cultures of these places, the history of these places, vis-a-vis what we experienced beyond the realm, beyond the veil, as they say. And that was the deal. I was the host of this because I've been working on Travel Channel forever. I did a show called Mysteries at the Museum, more than 20 seasons of that show. And so I've been on that channel for a long time. We didn't want to stop. And so they said, well, what do you want to do next? And I was like, well, I want to do this adventure show, but you guys do paranormal now. And so we adapted to each other. I ended up doing a history of the paranormal, which was odd. I said to this meeting, I remember the meeting, I said, I've never seen a ghost in my life. Why would I host a ghost show? And it turned into, well, that's kind of interesting because there's a big part of the audience out there that has never seen a ghost and a big skeptical audience. And yet there's so many of these shows on television that ask you to just suspend your disbelief if you're one of those people. This is a show that sort of sits in both camps, vis-a-vis me, because I do too. You know, who kind of says, this is interesting. I'm certainly drawn to the Hollywood version of all of this stuff. I watch my share of movies and read those books, and I get off on it just like anybody does. But really, was my outlook. Well, the really became, wow, not only are these people having these experiences, and I'm having them with them, and therefore the viewer as well, but they're tied to really deep themes and deep legends and deep myths about places that end up revealing the story of these locations so much more clearly than I knew them before. So it ended up being kind of just an interesting history lesson on one level, accompanied by having this ghost experience.
Now, I'm talking to Don Wildman, host of Buried Worlds, premieres tonight on the Travel Channel. Now, when you dug into some of these myths and legends, were the myth and legend that you heard pretty close to the real story that you're finding out, or was it completely different? Completely different.
I mean, really, very, very much so. There's an accepted reality to most of these things. For instance, the Monday night, tonight's episode is about vampires. And I go to Bulgaria. Now, I've done two other shows on Vlad the Impaler, kind of the traditional Count Dracula figure in history that people go to and reference. But Bulgaria, down below Romania, which is where Count Dracula, Vlad was from, has its own version of all of this. And so vampires are it's kind of an accepted reality among many people in that world because it's not Count Dracula. It's not our Hollywood version that we all know and love. It's more of a malevolent sort of demonic force that needs to be coped with in its own sort of way. And so I meet with a group of vampire hunters, we call them. They were called Sabonici. That's the word for them. And they're a group of three in this case, a medium, a spiritualist, and an actual vampire hunter. We go to a mountaintop village. All we had were the GPS coordinates in the crew. I drive out there, and we don't know what we're going to do when we meet these guys, and what we're going to find is in the creepiest village I've ever seen in my life. Where every one of these houses had some demonic reference on them, and like it was an address, a mathematical formula that ended up being 666. It was weird. And then we go from house to house in a hunt, basically looking for evidence that the spirituality of this place has something to do with these terrible events that happen in the area. And that's why we were there. This team had been called there by the surrounding village because the wild stock, the cattle and so forth were being killed. That stuff you hear about with aliens and so forth, that was happening in the woods around that area. So we hunt for this guy, and it ends up being a ritual that really happened after about 12 hours of shooting that day. That was kind of jaw-dropping. kind of made a very tired crew wake right up.
Now, when you're going into a place like that, is there any pushback from the people that live in that area, or are they accepting of you of coming in?
Both. I mean, when we were down in Virginia, we were in a place called Matthews County, Virginia, which is very, very famous in the paranormal community. American towns don't necessarily want to be known for being paranormal. You know, these are people with houses, and they don't want their property values, affected by this sort of thing. But the stories are undeniable. And so you come in, and eventually, we're good at what we do, and we're nice people, and so people end up, working with us. But, yeah, there was some pushback in that particular area. Around the world, we're just the weirdo American guys who are coming in to do some story. I'll tell you the funny aspect of this is that we were sometimes understood to be just straight history, because I actually have shows that have shown in Hungary and Budapest. They get dubbed around the world and stuff. So people know me over there in certain quarters. So people thought I was just going to be doing a history show, and suddenly I'm asking them, where's the ghost? It was pretty funny.
What came first in your life, the interest of adventures and finding out things, or the television part of it?
The former. I was the last of 5 kids, and I'm the only boy. So I have 5 mothers, and I was allowed to go places because my real mother was tired of raising kids. And so as a boy, I was just riding my bike all over the state of New Jersey because I was just allowed. And so we would camp a lot, and I would get a lot of those kinds of experiences on my own. My dad was a history teacher, so between the adventuring and the history stuff, that carried me into my adult life, which was eventually hosting television shows. What happened was luck combined with a natural instinct, and I found myself wanting to explain. It's a total codependent problem. I'm always wanting people to understand stuff. It drives my wife crazy. I bored her to death over our marriage, trying to talk about history and trivia and stuff like that. And that's what I ended up doing on camera. So my career is both, it's in both camps. I'm carrying you along, but I'm going into this place on my own as well. The best part of my job, honestly, is off camera, because when the cameras stop, we can continue climbing and experiencing these places and having, you've got an expert with you. And so you learn so much off camera. That's amazing.
Now, do you enjoy the part of the investigation itself, or taking your findings and presenting it to the fans on the show?
No, that's a good question. You're talking about post-production, because basically TV is storytelling. And if we just put sort of the organic experience on TV, nobody would watch. You have to build a story. You have to make it interesting for the viewer. And then there's just the cynical side. You can't have them go away for a commercial and not come back. So you got to build in a tease. And there's all kinds of stuff that's actually its own little science and a really fascinating practice. But I'm interested in the teaching of it myself. One of my favorite things is I've gotten to be twice as old as my cameraman. And so these 25-year-old guys are shooting me now, and I'm teaching them a lot. We're talking about stuff, from the perspective of I'm a lot older than these guys, and so we have a fun time in that, new role that I have, which is really cool.
I'm talking to Don Wildman, host of Buried Worlds with Don Wildman, premieres tonight on the Travel Channel. And it's an interesting world we live in now, because people, they learn more from things like television and the internet. So it's kind of a good source they're getting from someone like you.
Yes, the factual programming world is what we call it on our end. And yeah, it's exploded, documentaries, all the rest of it on Netflix and so forth. It's just a natural place for people to go, whereas when I was younger, that was pretty small place to go, a pretty small pot to draw from. It's all over the place, and people are always hungry. You can learn a lot by watching something. The information goes into your brain so quickly, and it's a really bottomless challenge for somebody in my position, because you kind of draw the line, the line in the sand. Where are we going to? What are we trying to load these people up with? What was cool about this, as opposed to other history shows I've done, is that there was an actual experience. I actually had to have an experience in every one of these episodes multiple times with a medium, who was actually talking to the spirit, or a ghost hunter who knew, if he did this, that, and the other thing, he would get some response. These were real, experiments for me. And I really enjoyed that kind of role. There's so much of this, especially on Travel Channel. It's so much paranormal stuff on TV now. I embraced the idea that maybe people who are watching these things don't necessarily are comfortable, or maybe they just don't believe in this stuff. Let's entertain that. Let's engage with that skepticism, and maybe that can lead to us to a new relationship.
If people want to find out more about you or the show, where's the best place they can find that info? TravelChannel.com. I think that's where you go. I'm in the middle of building a new website for myself, so I can't send them to where I normally would. But TravelChannel.com has a lot of this stuff. And just poke around with my name. It's all over the place now. So. Well,
that sounded like the biggest brag ever, didn't it? I'm so famous, really.
Well, you've done a lot of interesting things, and I think people want to find out more about it for sure.
I hope they think of me. I hope they think of history when they think of me. Honestly, that's my interest in life, and I think Americans of all people on Earth need to improve their historical knowledge and understand that the world is a lot older than us, and many of the things we deal with in the world come from that problem, that challenge, and we need to embrace it.
Don Wildman, host of Buried Worlds on the Travel Channel, premieres tonight. Thank you so much, Don, for taking the time today.
Thanks for your time. Me too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Rockford's home for classic rock, 96.7 The Eagle.